Thanks first of all to Charlie and Alyssa for getting this magnificent enterprise together. I think it's a really important topic to be discussing, and so I'm also grateful as Director of Oxford Medieval Studies that this has been possible to pull together. Amid lots of other things going on, I have a catalogue here of the exhibition which is currently on in the Tellurian, which is also curated by Alyssa. How do we remember rightly? What are our responsibilities as academics with regard to the cultural industry surrounding anniversaries? These questions had interested me for a long time, but I became much more aware of it when I came to Britain as a Germanist. How do you position yourself as a German and Germanist, for example, when asked to contribute to commemorating 1914 as the start of World War I, with the outbreak of war rather perversely much more discussed than the end of it? I was acutely confronted with these questions when I took on to organize events around the quincentenary of Martin Luther, publishing the 95 Theses in 2017. How to communicate to a British public the significance of the Reformation. How to deal with the man behind the quincentenary. He became the fastest selling Playmobil figure in history, since Playmobil only does figures if they can compose them of existing elements. He's composed of a policeman's hat, a woman's wig, and the best thing, a vampire's coat. There are few figures in German history which have been claimed by such diverse groups as Martin Luther, but a particularly persistent claim was made by nationalists for Luther der Deutsche. This trope was there from the start, gained traction in the 19th century, and was then prominently used during National Socialism. It persisted for an astonishingly long time. But afterwards seems to have been all have to be going away and being more or less absent in 2017. So I'm going to speak about this rise and fall of remembering the Reformation from the right. This is linked to the previous paper in a way, since this is also about re-evaluating a period of history, this one at the other end of the Middle Ages, and contextualizing it anew. It is in a way a story of hope, because I would argue that medieval studies has contributed to reclaiming the Reformation from a nationalist reading by looking at the Reformation as medieval. I'm going in this paper to look at two forms of appropriation of Luther by the National Socialists. The first is represented by the poster I used as my title, advertising a drama, Der Nonnenkrieg von Kloster Meding, showing the victory of the German Reformation over the Middle Ages despite the war naive medieval nuns staged against it. The second example will be the use of Ein feste Burg, Luther's signature hymn by the Deutsche Christen, the state church during National Socialism. In the final part, I will sketch how this was slowly overcome, this Luther der Deutsche, through a new contextualization of the whole Reformation as a medieval event, with 1983, the 500th anniversary, as a crunch time when new scholarly readings of Luther were side by side with nationalist remnants in West Germany and Luther as a socialist revolutionary in East Germany, effectively claiming him both from far right and from far left. Before I can do so, I will need to have a very brief timeline to explain why memorial culture and the Reformation are so intricately linked and how the nationalistic narrative could develop in the first place. 1617, the first anniversary of the publication of the 95 Theses, can claim to be the occasion when memory ritual designed by and for academia became a public phenomenon. Until then, the only anniversaries to be celebrated were those of the foundation dates of Protestant German universities. So it's not astonishing that the date that was chosen as the symbolic date were the publication of theses for an academic debate. What that really meant, you can read in our introduction to the 95 Theses in the Taylorian publication. That they were fixed to the church door by Luther is only reported after his death, and the hammer is a 19th century prop. The Protestant princes needed a symbol of unity during the upheaval of the 30 Years' War, and the pithy format of theses was an appropriate vehicle. The other reason to pick that date was that it worked as a unifying cause for Lutherans and Calvinists, since the two German princes and driving forces behind it were the Lutheran Saxon and the Calvinist Palatine elector. The kingdoms of Denmark and Sweden joined in the celebrations, and since then, every century. So memorial culture becomes embedded through remembering the Reformation in a wider European context, and the date comes about because it fits a German agenda of remembering this as a German event. 1717 was marked by two very different ends of the Protestant spectrum, resulting both in the building of the Frauenkirche in Dresden as monument of the established Lutheranism and Enlightenment in Saxony, and the growth of the community at Herrenhut as dissenting Protestantism. From the Reformation, the Jubiläumskultur spread across to secular institutions, especially in the historicism of the 19th century, resulting in Reformation memorial events every quarter century. This combined with an increasing Personenkult. So you had then in the 19th century Luther as a tin soldier, and the founding father of German unity. So, and every centenary since then had its own moment. So in 1917, German was celebrated as German savior in distress. In 1933, it became with a quote from Feste Burg as the safe stronghold in Martin Luther. And then 1983, well, come to later, there was a separate memory of Luther in the West and in the East. But now to my two case studies. First, the appropriation for overcoming the dark ages of the non-German Middle Ages, where Germany was dictated for by Rome and outside. So, and it starts. This is a publication that was performed then, a new drama performed in 1934 and insists on being Der Nonnenkrieg von Medingen ist eine durchaus geschichtliche Episode aus den Religionswirren der Reformationszeit. And it was unter der Schirmherrschaft des Reichsministers für Volksaufklärung und Propaganda. So the claim was, I'll just see that I copied over a slightly outdated version of this PowerPoint, but so I'll have to improvise with the translation going on. But so it was a part of a Festspielkultur that was developed in Germany to have stage popular entertainment that would instruct in the right historical understanding of German history. And you could get reduced entry if you came as a group of the Hitlerjugend and if you had walked there. So for every 50 kilometers you had walked, you got half a reduction of the enterprise. So you had a training in physical fitness as well as in German history. And these Volksschauspiele were staged around Germany. And how it's sold to the popular to the groups is that it's a play about winning victory through Blut und Kraft und Sinnen. So, wenn dieses Spiel beginnt, when this play starts, so lebt ihr mit den Kampf der Seelen die Himmelsgüter. So it's a fight for heavenly goods und werdet sehen, wie sich entscheidet. The author Eleonora von Rommel, a relative of the General von Rommel, is trying to imitate high German culture by adopting Faust prologue on heaven. Yeah. And you'll learn from that, dass den Glauben leidet, wer ihn erfasst mit Blut und Kraft und Sinn und seht die Gotterkenntnis Sieg gewinnen. What is portrayed here as medieval times to be overcome is a caricature of medieval practice. So you see enacted actually by all of the village population together with the women living in the convent of Meding at that time and with a local schoolmaster as Duke Ernst and a cobbler from the village padded with lots of cushions as the comic friar who's sitting at the entrance to the monastery and is praising his indulgences. Wie? 7 Taler nur? You only want to pay 7 guilders. Why not pay 10? Then you are free to sin as much as you like. And the money, of course, goes directly to Rome, financing outside enterprises. And confronted with that is the Protestant Duke, who is following der Herr des Klosters und der weiten Lande von Lüneburg, der Herzog Ernst, voll Eifer der reinen Lehre Luthers hingegeben, verspürte des Gewissens heißes Drängen, die anvertrauten Klosterseelen Medings zur Schrift zu führen, Kirchenwert zu lösen vom heiligen Wort der Bibel, allen fromm bisher verwehrt. Er forderte die Klöster zuerst mit Bitten, dann mit strenger Drohung zu der Bekehrung auf. Er hieß ja der Bekenner und seine Waffe war das Lutherwort. Und obgleich alle Teufel hier wollten widerstehen, so wird doch ohne Zweifel Gott nicht zurückgegeben. It's a cluster of misinformation about the historical state happening there. The Duke Ernst was not so much driven by eagerness for Luther, but more eagerness for the monastic holdings of the nuns. And they were actually those who had been studying scripture. It wasn't him introducing the nuns to their own literature. And anyway, he wasn't in charge. It was his perfect moment to take over what had been outside his relevance. What also is wrong is the quotation at the end. It's not Luther, it's Paul Gerhardt actually. It's from Befiehl du deine Wege, verse 7. But it's Eleonore von Rommel probably just associated it with Luther because it's him, and it is based on actually the most prominent Protestant hymn, which had been claimed by Heinrich Heine as the Marseillaise of the Reformation, Luther's version of Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength. And so the second case I'm briefly looking at is how his Luther's psalm paraphrase was misunderstood and used by different Protestant factions to propagate militant German expansion. You see here Protestant hymn book for Elsass-Lothringen, where you see the castle on the hill as present. To reclaim it really for you have to look at his psalm paraphrases as a medieval exercise, and I could show in detail, if I weren't in time constraints, how much of how Luther deals with a psalm text is based on medieval hymn strategies. And actually the castle he's referring to is directly taken from the psalm and isn't to be understood as a secular realm, but rather as the spiritual home. And it's allegorized and put into context by showing clearly the struggle that is described in here isn't a struggle over worldly goods, let alone about Germany, but it's about a spiritual struggle, and it can only be understood from really the last verse, where it says, even if secular powers are taking away everything from us, we don't care, because we don't look for worldly goods. We look only towards the spiritual, the lasting kingdom. Theirs is the short-lived day, ours is the lasting kingdom. This verse, so the first verse was taken out of context and became in the 19th century the opening hymn for every German national event. And they would sing it in the 19th century then fashion, Ein feste Burg ist unser Gott. And then in the during National Socialism, the other faction of the church, the so-called Bekennende Kirche, with figures like Bonhoeffer and Karl Barth, set against it the last verse, this one, but they pointedly sang it to the medieval version of the tune. So they reinstated its historic meaning through rhythm and tune. So, das Wort sie sollen lassen stehen und kein Dank dazu haben. So you had a kind of battle of hymns going on. So, the first verse only sung by the Deutsche Christen, the last verse only sung by the Bekennende Kirche. And their reading of it became then, after World War II, the one that became official. And if you look at a modern English translation of the third verse, you can see how this reception history is written into the modernized translation. So here, the tyrants of this age strut briefly on the stage, which takes in a way the National Socialist confutation of the Bekennende Kirche. So what has changed now through after this appropriation of the National Socialists? The reception of the hymns changed, and for the 500th anniversary of Luther's birth, both the GDR and West Germany tried to define anew what they were really seeing in Luther and in the Reformation. So the GDR defined him as, they were written by a working group of fellows of the Akademie der Wissenschaften der GDR, with Erich Honecker as official sign-off, and he declared it as the new scholarly image of Luther, and surprise, he really was an early working class revolutionary, which didn't really get the approval of everybody, while in West Germany there was the rediscovery of the Reformation as a medieval event, particularly looking at Reformation as coming out of an understanding of apocalyptic feeling of the late Middle Ages. So the entrance to the exhibition in Nuremberg was with a life-size cast, so as high as that of the Last Judgment portal from Wittenberg. And it, in a way, was also conveying this feeling of doomed times in that period, and it was the first publication I bought because I was really impressed as a teenager who just moved to Nuremberg by this telling about the end of time. So when I looked back at this exhibition now in 2017, what struck me was how really medievalists, so it was a group mainly from Göttingen, church historians such as Hartmut Müller, looking at the continuity between 15th and 16th century, had chimed accord with a period. So I looked at this exhibition catalogue again, and only noted now that it has a 20-page appendix of advertisement. And this advertisement is mainly by security firms. Sie haben alles für die Sicherheit getan, wirklich. So this feeds into the apocalyptic theme from a different way. And in a way, it's not much different from buying your indulgence in the 1600s. You can still get time of purgatory if you go to the Beinhofskapelle in Bleibach near Freiburg. You had this feeling of apocalypse coming at you from both ends, and reflecting the spiritual meaning. But what was also striking to me was that in this catalogue there existed this new evaluation of Luther side by side with advertisement for popular far-right publications. So the Mut Verlag, the Courage publication house, was talking about die Schrumpfdeutschen unserer Zeit haben in ihrer Lust an der nationalen Selbstpreisgabe die Brücken zur Geschichte abgebrochen. So the dwarfish Germans of our period have abundant tradition. So we have to look back to Martin Luther, den größten Deutschen deutscher Nation. The same applied to Luther, der deutsche Prophet, that promises to show how Germans can free themselves from tyranny nowadays by following the historic mission of the Nothelfer Luther. But so you have here really a literally rearguard action, as it were, of looking at celebrations in 2017. I haven't come across any advertisement for similar books. But finishing now with a question, how do we remember now Luther and the Reformation in 2017? So we decided to use the kind of popular icon to engage audiences beyond it, but to focus not so much on other men, so I'll turn him over now, but rather on Reformation as a process, and to do it under three headings that both showed the medieval background of the Reformation, but also appealed to contemporary audiences. And these three elements were printing, so looking at the Reformation as a time of media change, then translating, how contents can be made accessible to a wider audience, and singing, so looking back at the hymn heritage and how it can be applied to modern time. So we tried to make the Reformation, redefine the Reformation as an ongoing event that would look at making accessible heritage, but also taking in the new critical reading of Luther as man, and to go beyond the Personenkult and to take back the Reformation from the right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrike. That was brilliant. I'd like to quickly